Hello friends, in standard 11 chapter number 1 The Living World, we have already discussed about the general characters and the organizations of living organisms and life. Now, based on those facts what we have already gone through, understood, we would like to define the life and what is living organism first. Then we are also supposed to go through basic characteristic features of all living creatures, right? So let us discuss the definitions of life and living organism. So based on previous discussion, based on general characteristic feature and based on the organization, we can conclude that life is very unique. Number one. Number two, complex. But what complex? It is complex organization of molecules, right? Biomolecules makes the organelles of the cells. From the organelles of the cells, you can have the cells. From cells you have organs, from organs organ system and organism. So it is a complex organization of molecules which express through chemical reaction, and that chemical reactions are nothing else than biochemical reaction, and which is also known as metabolism. Now it leads to growth, development, responsiveness, adaptation and reproduction. So these are features which can be shown by living creatures, living organisms, right? So that's a basic definition of the life. So life is a unique complex organization of the molecules expressing through the chemical reactions which leads to growth, development, responsiveness, adaptation and reproduction. So I request you to take a screenshot of this slide for your preparation of your notes so that I can move to the other slide. Fine. Here is the definition of living organism. A living organism is something that, number one, self-replicating, number two, evolving, number three, self-regulating, interactive system which is capable of responding to the external stimuli. So as far their external parameters, maybe temperature, maybe air, maybe water, any of the environmental factor, when it is changing, that immediate response should be given, right? And that is by self-regulation, automatic, self-generated, right? So living organism can do it, but non-living cannot. So living organism is self-replicating, evolving, self-regulating, interactive system which is capable of responding to their external stimuli. So this is the basic most definition which is which can be used for living organisms. Fine. Okay, basic differences between living and non-living we have been gone through since last 5-6 years, means since standard 5 you are learning differences between these both of living and non-living. So I am not going to explain those characteristic feature. Ready? So please take the screenshot of this slide and we are moving into the next slide. Fine. So that's the basic property what we are going to see in this chapter. So first property what we are going to see is the growth. So growth is the number one property what we are going to see. Number two is reproduction. Number three is metabolism. Number four is cellular organization. And number five is consciousness. So these are the five basic properties which can be shown by living organism, though it may be microorganism, though it can be plants, though it can be animals, fungi, whatsoever they are. So all of them, all of the living organisms are showing these basic properties. Ready? So let us discuss two of the basic property in this lecture. First, growth. Second, reproduction. So you please take the screenshot of this slide. Fine. So let me define and explain the growth first. Right? In the simplest term, growth is increase in number and mass. Ready? Now, increase in number or in mass, both can be considered as a growth. For example, if a cell is dividing from one cell to the to two cells, right? So these two cells from one cell, it is one cell which are converted into two cells. So here the number is increased, which is shown by this diagram which is given here. These are the cell division process. So two cells are produced there, right? But if you see into the other diagram which is at the base, there the mass of the tissues is increased into plant. So plant is growing by its size, right? So in place of mass, we can also use size or length or width. Any of terminology can be put in place of mass. So either in the case of number or in the case of mass or size or length or width, it is growth only. But if I talk about living organism, it is done by cells, right? It is done by cell or cell division. That is why by cell division is used here. So that's a simple most understanding of growth, that growth is done by size or by number. Now if I talk about any of the living organism can or are showing both kind of growth. All the living organism can grow by number also and by size also. For example, if I talk about humans, right? So we can grow by size, we know. By number, two way it is possible. For example, human produces their offspring. So one man may be having one son, one daughter. So from one they are growing by number into 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And the cell of our body, my own body, a single organism, right? My body also grow. So a man, how they, for example, that man has started a journey with a single cell called zygote. Now it divides continuously to produce so many cells. In turn, the embryo. So it is an embryo. If you see this journey from single cell of zygote to embryo, number of cells are also increased and size of embryo is also increased, right? So size and number both are increased in this case. So any of the organism are having this both type of growth they are showing during their life cycle. So living organism can show both type of growth in their life cycle, by number as well and by size as well, right? So this is what you are supposed to remember. Please take the screenshot. Okay. Now specifically with reference to two most distinct types of organisms, one is plant, second is animal. Pattern of the growth, let me write. Is different. Now when I talk about plant, in plant growth is continuous throughout their lifespan until that plant die. Growth is constantly seen in plant. But if I talk about growth in animals, it is seen only up to certain age. For example, when we are getting birth, up to 20 years of age we grow. Then growth in size stops, right? However, though our growth in size is stopped, but cell division occurring, right? But when, as and when wear and tear or maintenance of your body requires at that time only. So when you lose your cells, to replace those lost cell, then only your cell division can be seen. So cell division is limited up to wear and tear or maintenance of body only in animals. So in plant, growth continues throughout the lifespan, and in animals, growth is limited up to certain age, but cell division can be possible throughout the life as and when required throughout their according to their need. In plant, if you remember, into class 9th and 10th you have gone through that. Plant is having a particular type of tissue called meristematic tissues at a particular location at the tip of the plant where continuous growth is happening. Ready? So apical bud or lateral bud are responsible for this continuous growth in plant. You are also supposed to remember this. Ready? So that's what the pattern of the growth which are found in general within plants or animals. Fine. I hope you are clear with that, and please take the screenshot of this slide so that we can move ahead. Fine. The difference between growth of living and growth which is shown by non-living as well, right? So growth, when we are discussing, or what we have discussed, is it is either in size or in number. Maybe mass, if I talk about size. For example, it was no mountain, but right now so many mountains. So number of mountains are increased, right? There were no desert. Right now deserts are so many. So number of deserts increased on the earth. Size. These is Himalayan mountain range. What is shown here? And these mountain ranges is right now also increasing by a very slow process. The height of Mount Everest still is increasing, right, due to physical forces. So we cannot say that only living organism shows a particular pattern of growth. No, non-living also can grow, right? So basically, when we have addressed the growth is as an increase in mass or size, non-living objects also grow. How? The surface accumulation of material, layer by layer. So growth is, what you are supposed to remember is, growth is not a defining property of living organism, that only living organism can do that. We cannot say that. Ready? So growth is not defining property of living organism, because growth can be shown by non-living as well. In living organism, growth is from inside, whereas the growth in non-living is from outside. It is by surface accumulation. The word what we have used here is surface accumulation. So it is from outside to inside. Ready? So that's the difference between growth of living organism and non-living. Our growth is from inside to outside, and non-living objects are showing growth from outside. Ready? So that's the basic difference between growth of living and non-living. So that's the story, or that's the difference between the growth of living and non-living objects. So please take the screenshot of this slide as well. Now let me clarify about properties of living organism with respect to type of growth. Ready? Type of growths. Number one, on the basis of lifespan, duration, right? Lifespan duration. For example, A. So two types of growth can be possible. One is definite growth. Second is indefinite growth. Now, definite growth up to certain age only, for example, can be shown by animals and some part of plant. For example, fruits, leaf, flowers are coming at a particular age for particular duration only. So those kind of growth is termed as definite growth. Now, indefinite growth, the growth is seen for entire lifespan. For example, general growth of the plant, that is plant stem, plant root, or number of branches, and in animals, snake, right? So two types of growth based on the lifespan duration are definite growth and indefinite growth. Both are showing the relative examples, animals and plant both. Fine. The second classification of the growth is on the basis of location, where the growth is happening. Right? For example, there are two types of growth. Again, diffused growth and local or localized growth. If growth is happening throughout all the body parts together at a time, right? So all the body parts grow into the proper proportion, it is called diffused growth. But due to certain specific activity of specific part, only a particular part is growing, not the other, then it is called localized growth. For example, activity of cell in meristem. So particular part where it is growing, for example, fruit or flower, so it is localized growth. But if I'm saying about the width of the plant, it is diffused growth. It is growing throughout, right? And all the twigs, all the branches are equally getting the growth. So on the basis of location, two types of growth are there: diffused growth and localized growth. Now, the third types of classification, which is based on mechanism, that is C, based on the mechanism. Number one, internal growth. Number two, external growth. Just before this slide, into the next slide, difference between living and non-living growth, right? So living organisms are showing growth from inside. It is called internal growth, and it is happening due to the cell division process, right? So all the living organisms or cell is doing internal growth. But when I am talking about non-living cells, right, due to stratification, they are going layer by layer, they are growing, and that is why it is called external growth. So internal and external growth are the two types of growth on the basis of mechanism of growth. So that is where we are ending the first topic, growth. Please take the screenshot of the slide. Now, second important property of living organism is reproduction. So reproduction is what? Re means again, and production, generate or make. So when you make the living organism again from the older one, in that sense it is called reproduction. So reproduction is the event, physiological process by which living organism can produce their offsprings, their next generations. So actual definition of reproduction is what? It's the physiological process by which living organism can produce their offsprings, that is babies. Babies word is actually non-scientific. So I have used scientific word known as offsprings, next generation. So it is a physiological event involved mechanism for generation of for production of the next generation new offspring. So similar to, they tend to be similar to their parents. Ready? So that is also to be considered, that they must be uh, exactly not identical, but tend to be similar to their parents. So it is the production of progeny or offspring having a feature similar to those of the parent. For example, if you compare yourself to your parent, you have so many similar character, very small variation. So most of the characters, for example, your hands, your legs, your mouth, your stomach, all are at a particular points, particular place only. It is similar to your forefathers as well. So they are continuing this kind of character, forwarding from one generation to the other. So it is tend to be similar to their parent. Yes, color may be different, size, length, uh, maybe weight can be different, your thought may be different, your intelligence must be different, right? But external features moreover tend to be similar. So organism produced by two modes. Mode number one is asexual reproduction. Mode number two is sexual reproduction. We know the differences between them, so I am not going to have a huge explanation on that. Asexual mode of reproduction is generally done by a single parent and or a single cell, right? So the progeny or offspring will be having similar character, identical, right? It will be clone of their parent. But if I talk about sexual mode of reproduction, it involves either two cells or two organisms. One must be male gamete, one must be female gamete, produced by male and female respectively. Fertilization is the event which makes enable the sexual mode of reproduction to happen. By fertilization, zygote is produced and multicellular organism can be produced by sexual mode of reproduction this way, which produce high degree of variation. Difference into the character can be produced particularly by sexual mode of reproduction. And this is why it has been evolved to produce variation, to change shape, structure, in order to adapt with the surrounding atmosphere very fast. Ready? So if suppose some organism, one of the living organism has to adapt to particular environment, it has to make change in their structure or function, which is only done by sexual mode of reproduction. So that is why evolution of sexual mode of reproduction is there. So there are two types of reproduction, that is sexual mode of reproduction and asexual mode of reproduction. So these are two major types of, there are even subtypes of asexual reproduction as well, and changes of the mode of the sexual mode of reproduction also we can observe, but that can be apart from this discussion. So please take the screenshot of this slide so that we can go through the next slide. Now specifically to unicellular organism. Growth and reproduction are same because they reproduce by cell division. Ready? Now, what is reproduction? It is production of progeny. Now, if a single cell, for example, this is a single cell, want to generate the next progeny, that is 2 daughter cells. So it has to divide. So from 1, it is converted into 2. So if you see, the number is increased, that is also a growth, right? It is the growth. And if you see, this is parent and this is offspring. So in that inverted aspect, it is reproduction. So in that sense, growth and reproduction are a single event, two sides of a coin, we can say, into the unicellular organisms. I hope you have particularly understand this phenomena, why growth and reproduction both are same into the unicellular organism. Please take the screenshot of the slide so that we can move to the other. Fine. So that's the multicellular organism. So in majority of the higher organisms, that is multicellular, growth and reproduction are mutually exclusive event, right? In unicellular, it was single. Here, mutually exclusive event, different event, right? Growth by size, reproduction by number. So that is how it is separate event, exclusive event, but mutual. Now, why mutual? The word mutual has got very huge meaning by itself. For an example, if I am talking about reproduction of a particular higher organism, for example, human. So the human which are responsible for reproduction are matured or young, which is called adult. So adults are responsible for reproduction to produce a new generation. Now, when they are getting birth, they are supposed to go through the growth to develop themselves from a small baby to adult. So first event is what? Growth. Then at the particular age, they can generate the germ cells to reproduce. So afterward, they can reproduce by production of germs. So though they are separate event, though growth and reproduction are separate event, but they are mutually dependent on each other, right? They are dependent on each other. Those both events are dependent on each other. That's why it is mentioned that it is mutually exclusive event, mutual as well and exclusive as well. Fine. So that's the deep meaning of that statement which is given here. So please take the screenshot of the slide. Fine, that's the last slide what we are supposed to observe. As we have seen that living organism can reproduce their offspring their progeny which are similar to them. But not all the living organism can do it. There are many types of organisms which cannot reproduce. Ready? They are infertile or sterile. For example, mules, worker honeybee, or sterile human couples which cannot produce their babies. So though they are actually tend to reproduce, but they could not be able to due to circumstances, maybe genetical, maybe some mutation, maybe some other accidental event, or maybe environmental, chemical or physical forces are making them unable to reproduce. So many organisms cannot reproduce, and the example which are given, mules, worker honeybees, and infertile human couples. Hence, reproduction also is not perfect defining property of living organisms. All living organisms can reproduce, but not all. Right? So living organisms definitely are tend to reproduce, but many of the organisms are incapable of reproduction. So all living organisms cannot reproduce. That is why it is also not a perfect definition or defining property of the living organism. So with these explanation, I am ending my session. Take a screenshot of this slide, and we are going ahead with the other living property, other main properties of living organism into the next lecture. I'll see you then. Have a nice time. Bye.